Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see so many faces in the audience. The May 1st, 2024 regular meeting of the Vallecitos Water District will come to order. Before we begin, I'd like to read an announcement that members of the public may watch the meeting live via computer or smart device by going to the district's website and clicking on the Watch Live icon. However, they will not be able to participate in the meeting remotely. Members of the public may also listen to the meeting live on their phone by dialing 888-788-0099 toll-free or 877-853-5247 also toll-free. When prompted, please enter the meeting ID and passcode displayed on the district's website. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask Sophia to please lead us. Please rise.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophia. Okay, roll call. Please indicate your attendance. All present. Thank you. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
No, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda for the regular meeting of May 1st, 2024?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Director Hernandez. Motion by Director Hernandez. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice President Pinnock. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Okay, motion passes. Do we have any public speakers?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. I believe first up is a presentation, North County Water Agency's fourth grade calendar contest winners.
Thank you, President Boyd Hodgson, boards members. Always a really special day to be able to bring in students that competed in our annual water conservation poster calendar contest. At the end of the year, these images will be put into a calendar for 2025. These are the contest winners for our specific service area. Our first participant and winner is an honorable mention. It's Ella Daniels from Discovery Elementary School.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay, so you got some good news in there.
Thank you.
So our third place winner is Bradley Cassidy from Bay Point Academy, and he has a fever today and isn't able to make it, but his mom works over at Palomar College, so she will come by tomorrow and pick up his awards. Our second place winner is Sophia Cortez, who did our Pledge of Allegiance. Sophia. It's all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, our first place winner is Hadley Swenson from La Costa Meadows Elementary School. Hadley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hang right there, and I want to get the board members in the photo with you. They're coming around. Oh, parents, grandparents, sister, go ahead and get your photo before I do. This is more important. Yes. Okay, so we have to figure out 5 and 3, right? Oh, this will work.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, in the windows, nicely done. Super. Thank you so much. So students, you are welcome to stay, but we are going to have a budget hearing, which is long and not real exciting. And you're welcome to go. I will get calendars to the students.
Hey, you're not selling workforce development very
This,
well.
this is our hype guy.
You're not selling it.
You done or? No, I got one more. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Congratulations. Okay, moving on to the consent items. May I have a motion? Well, first, does anyone want to pull anything from the agenda? Nope, okay. Then may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Motion by Director Ellithorpe. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, second by Director Grosset. Any discussion? Nope. Okay, please vote. And the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to action items. Action item 2.1, scholarship contest recommendation 2024.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So as the board's aware, we have our scholarship, and I believe this is our third year for scholarship. The P3 committee reviewed all the applications, went over and made its recommendations, and today our public information and conservation supervisor, Chris Robbins, will present on those items and recommendations.
So, thank you, General Manager. He explained it fairly well. This is the third year. We initially started this in 2022. Most recently, the Board of Directors approved an increase from $1,000 to $2,000 per scholarship, with a maximum of 6 scholarships offered to local high school seniors and students at both Palomar College and Cal State University San Marcos. I issued a press release on February 1st with a deadline of March 29th, 2024 to have the submittals, and a total of 13 scholarships were received by the deadline. They were reviewed by the P3 committee, and they found 4 applicants that are pursuing careers in water or a closely related field. And so the recommendation is that the Board of Directors approve 4 scholarships in the amount of $2,000 each, for a total program budget of $8,000.
Do I have any public speakers for this item?
No, ma'am.
Okay, what questions do my colleagues have about this item?
Just a big thank you. I appreciate it. I would like to say something, yeah.
Okay.
Because I was on the P3 committee before, and it's great going through those applications, so I appreciate your work, Eric and Tiffany, on that. And I think it's a great program. I think it gives incentive and/or just the presentation that these applicants put in. I just like that they're doing it, and it gives them the thought, hey, there is a career in water. I never thought about it before. So just that you're sending out a press release saying there's other people that didn't apply, but it's in the back of their mind. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about water or wastewater. So I appreciate that PR movement. To me, it's a great program.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bottom one.
Oh, there we go. Will we be delivering these awards personally at the board?
Absolutely, at the first board meeting in June. So
Okay,
this is the motion to trigger me asking finance to print checks that we can in turn give to the students.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting this on and receiving those scholarships. And I will say it was a very competitive field. And as you said, the biggest, most important thing was a future career in water. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to echo my colleagues' thanks for collecting the applications, looking through them, and making the logistics of the process easier for us. So thank you for doing that. One of the things that we have done in the last 4 years is focus on workforce development, and having these scholarships and giving away money to students that are studying water or the environment or a related field really goes a long way to helping folks continue their education in water. And I'm so proud that we do this. I think it's a tremendous community service, and $2,000 buys a lot of education at our local institutions and really builds that people pipeline. So thank you for continuing this effort, and thank you to my colleagues for implementing this effort and raising the amount of money that we award to these very deserving students. So thank you. And with that, may I have a motion to approve the award of, or to approve action item 2.1 as presented?
Motion to approve the scholarships.
Okay, I will second. So motion by Director Grosset, seconded by myself. Any discussion? Okay, please vote. Okay, and it passes unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Chris. Okay, moving on to action item 2.2, modification of wastewater capital facility fee.
Yes, and this item's been through several committees, so the board has familiarity with this, but this is a modification for our wastewater capacity fees, or capital facility fees, that regarding the new project being added, which is the Twin Oaks project, into our fee structure. At today's meeting, what we're asking for is not adoption of fees, it's actually setting the public hearing, which at the public hearing, which is where the boards will consider adopting the new fee per staff's request. With that, let me hand it over to our district engineer, Jason Hubbard.
All right, thank you, General Manager Gumpel. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. Tonight we are presenting on a modification of the wastewater capital facility fee. Wastewater capital facility fee is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to refer to it as the sewer cap fee for the remainder of the presentation, just so that's clear. Also to clarify, when we talk about the modification of this fee, we're actually talking about an increase to this fee, so I want that to be clear. And this is outlined on page 23 of your board packet. So the objectives of this presentation tonight is to explain what a cap fee is, why we're asking for an increase. I'm going to give you some background on foundational documents that establish the cap fee. Mr. Gilpin is going to discuss the legal framework for the cap fee. You're going to learn all about a sub-area master plan, which I know you're excited about, from Senior Engineer Lopez. We're going to hand it off to Mr. Morales from Black and Veatch, who's going to discuss the process for the calculation for that fee increase. And then I'm going to wrap it up with the fiscal impact, the outreach efforts, and then next steps. And as the General Manager said, at the conclusion of this presentation, staff is going to ask for a recommendation for the board to consider holding a public meeting on June 19th to consider the adoption of these fees. Again, we're not looking for an adoption tonight at this presentation. This is to provide information to the public and to the board so you can make that informed decision on whether to hold that meeting on June 19th or not. So what is a sewer cap fee? It is a fee assessed to a developer to reasonably fund wastewater facility improvements that accommodate growth. And when we talk about growth and expansion, you're going to see that throughout the presentation. That's used interchangeably. The fee is calculated per EDU, and that's 250 gallons per day. So when a developer comes in, they've got a project, whatever it is, it's going to generate a certain amount of sewer, and we capture that as EDUs. So EDU, number of EDUs, times the fee equals total amount that the developer is going to pay to the district. This fee is set by the board per ordinance. This fee is adjusted annually, and this fee is applied uniformly to all developers regardless of where their development is in the district's service area. So why are we discussing this fee increase? How did we get here tonight? So I want to explain by looking at that graphic. If you see that graphic, you can see the dark gray line. I want to see if I can get my laser pointer. So that dark line going north to south is an 8-inch pipeline that runs on Twin Oaks Valley Road, and it services that sewer basin. That pipeline is at capacity. That pipeline is not over capacity. There's no issues with that pipeline. It can continue to function in perpetuity for the rest of its remaining useful life. And to honor a request from Director Grosset, that pipeline, depending on where you look at it, has a risk score of 5 to 15. But again, this pipeline is at capacity. So what that means is there can be no further connections to this pipeline, and it effectively stops development in this basin. Now, when developers have a project, often off-site improvements are triggered to support that development, and the developer has several options. They can opt not to do the development. They can opt to do those improvements themselves, which typically they do. However, in this basin, the developments are very small scale, and the improvements are very large scale. So there's a disproportionate amount of improvements needed to support these smaller developments. Another option that the developers have is to wait for the district to build it. However, in this case, the district doesn't have any improvements on this corridor that's in its current rate structure. So we are not collecting cap fees to fund any improvements in this area or, along this corridor. So it's sort of a unique situation that developers in this process that we were working out with Elizabeth and her team is that they came to us and said, well, what other options do we have here? And what we need is we need a project and we need a way to fund it. Typically, we do this through a master plan. A master plan process takes several years, several $100,000. But we looked at another option, which was to just look locally at this basin and try to determine what that project would need to support this development. So you may recall December 2022, we came to the board amended the budget to create a project to create this, to study or to perform a sub-area master plan. We call it a SAMP, to identify what that project would be, and then subsequently what would be the fee increase to support that project. So that work has been done, and that's why we're here, and that's what we're going to present tonight. Before I get into that, I want to just give some brief foundational explanation on some of the foundational documents that set up that cap fee. So the cap fee supports growth CIP projects. And how do you get those projects? Where do those projects come from? They come from the master plan. We have a master plan. We call it the 2018 master plan. It was adopted in May of 2019. And it takes a lot of factors in coming up with those projects. It looks at the land use designation. It looks at population projections for 25, 30 years. It looks at our standard criteria, our model, the model of our system, and also the demand criteria for the district. Those 270,000 lines of data that Mr. Arthur likes to tout. Well, we look at those lines of data and we multiply it by 5, right? We look at 5 years of data. With all this other information, we're trying to project the trends. Where is growth going to occur and when is growth going to occur? And then based on that, we can decide what projects we're going to need to support that growth. Once you come up with that list of projects from the master plan, now you need a funding source. You need to figure out how to fund those projects, and that's what the cap fee study is. We have a cap fee study. We call it a nexus study, and it looks at that list of projects, and it's specifically the expansion component of those projects, and then how we're going to fund it. To do this, we use a method called the incremental method, which means growth pays for growth. And I want to reiterate that through this presentation, is we are talking about developer fees, growth paying for growth. This is not an impact to ratepayers. So I want that to be clear as we move forward, so that isn't lost. Looking at the expansion component of each project, we'll come up with what that cap fee is. It's a simple equation. I've got that equation here. Mr. Morales is going to elaborate that when he goes through the process of how this was calculated. But basically, it's the cost for the expansion component in your project plus the financing costs to get that divided by the number of EDUs generated by the growth. And that's the formula to come up with the cap fee. And again, this is applied uniformly to all developers. That study that we performed was adopted in 2019 and, as I mentioned, is updated annually. So perfect segue when we talk about how cap fees are put together is we also have to explain the legal framework for why we can support cap fees. And to that, I'm going to hand it to Mr. Gilpin, and I can advance those slides when you're ready.
Thank you, Jason. Staff and legal counsel have reviewed the study to ensure that it complies with the applicable laws. The applicable laws related to the cap fees include Article 13A, Section 4, Government Code Section 50076, Government Code Section 66013, and Constitution Section 13C. So under the Fee Mitigation Act, this is Government Code Section 66013, essentially establishes the baseline that the charges cannot exceed the estimated reasonable cost of providing the service, i.e., we're not in the business of making money, we only charge for the service being rendered. The capacity charge is a charge for a public facility in existence at the time the charge is imposed. So that's a requirement under the Mitigation Fee Act. Under another provision of the Fee Mitigation Act, Section 6601313, these capacity charges are not subject to other provisions in the Mitigation Fee Act, and there's no requirement for a nexus that applies to other types of development impact fees. Also, this is related to Prop 26, which is Constitutional Article 13C. The capacity, this is related to taxes. The charge is not a tax in that it's for a specific government service. And again, you'll see that standard that it cannot exceed the reasonable cost to the local government of providing the service. So again, these fees are related to the reasonable cost of providing the service. There are a number of cases here that have been included. They're not, so under the Richmond case, capacity fees are not necessarily tied to a property development and are not the subject of development impact fees. Then under the Capistrano case, the capacity fees, again, are not development impact fees and not subject to the same legal requirements that are applicable to development impact fees. Chappelle, which you'll hear, this is related to your policies that development pays for development. It's only fair that the people who are creating the burden are paying for that service. So developers cannot be required to shoulder the entire burden of financing public facilities for future users. Again, there has to be some connection between the reasonable cost of the facilities and the charges being imposed. This is the legal standard that would be applicable if someone were to challenge the charges or the rate study. It's currently a preponderance of evidence standard, i.e. more likely than not that the fees support the reasonable cost of the facilities. There are various methods, I guess, used, this isn't really a legal issue, but used by the American Water Works Association in terms of how these fees are calculated based on the facilities. There's a buy-in method that is based on the value of existing system capacity. There's an incremental cost method, which is based on the value of the cost to expand an existing system so that you can charge for the incremental cost. And there is also a combined approach where these two methodologies are blended to arrive at the proposed cap fee.
All right, perfect. Appreciate that. And really, this just kind of sets up, and we're just giving this background for you, just to explain that as we went through this process with looking at just this basin, that we stayed consistent with the foundational documents and the legal framework that had already been established. So we're not changing any of that in the process. So that's why that long intro, so apologize for that. But now I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth, and you're going to hear the results of the sub-area master plan.
So to provide some background, and as General Manager Gumpel mentioned, we have provided updates through the process at various P3 finance and engineering and equipment committees. So some of this might be a reminder, but I thought it important to discuss here. There's proposed development coming into this sewer basin, and through processing those projects, the water and sewer studies for 3 projects determined that the sewer is at capacity, which limits development in the basin, as Jason previously mentioned. The 2018 master plan does identify a developer-constructed and developer-funded Phase 4 capital project in Twin Oaks Valley Road. It's called SP 31 in the master plan. Growth anticipated in this portion of the district was anticipated after 2030, and sometimes projects in our master plan that anticipated growth after 2030. Those projects weren't included in our cap-free rate structure to fund it as a district CIP project, which is the case for the project currently in our master plan. So staff's recommendation to address this was to change this from a developer-funded CIP project to a district-funded CIP project, so that the Twin Oaks Valley Road sewer improvements can be constructed prior to Phase 4. And the recommendation was to accomplish this with the SAMP and determined the cap fee adjustment to incorporate this as a district CIP project. Sorry. So the purpose of the SAMP, it's basically an amendment to the master plan, which is one of the foundational documents that Jason previously discussed. And the primary purposes of it is to determine the CIP project scope, determine how much the cap fees need to be increased for the Twin Oaks Valley Road sewer improvements, and to evaluate options to accommodate growth within the basin. And the SAMP used the same process as the master plan. So for the results shown here, the improvements in Twin Oaks Valley Road are located north of Mission Road up to Deer Springs Road with varying pipe diameters of 10 to 18 inches. And adding this project as shown here to our cap fee structure is the permanent solution to accommodate growth in this sewer basin. The proposed project cost is estimated at approximately $20.6 million. Of that project cost, the expansion portion, which is paid for by developers through collections of cap fees, is approximately $16 million. So next I'll hand the presentation over to Mr. Morales with Black & Veatch, where he will discuss the proposed cap fee increase to add the CIP project to our current cap fee schedule so we can fund it as a district CIP.
I do have a quick question before we start. I noticed that those are 2019 dollars. Is there a plan in the works to update that to 2024 dollars?
That's what we're going to get into right now.
Great, okay, thank you.
It's the next part of the story.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. As previously mentioned, the purpose of this study was to update the capital facility fees to ensure that there's adequate funding for future improvements to the Twin Oaks sewer subbasin. The cap fee is a one-time fee levied to recover the cost of facilities that provide utility service to new customers. The fee is non-refundable and non-transferable, and is applied to all developers uniformly, regardless of the location within the service area. The cap fee is established in ordinance number 176 and is adjusted annually based on the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index for the Los Angeles region. The Engineering News Record only keeps record of certain major metropolitan areas within the United States, and Los Angeles being one of them. So that was the closest index to Vallecitos. The capital facility fee methodology is based on the incremental cost approach developed in the Atkins 2011 capacity fee study. The fee was updated in 2019 to incorporate the capital projects identified in the 2018 master plan. Now this update adds to the 2019 update with the addition of the Twin Oaks Subbasin Sewer Project. Next slide. Oh, perfect. Now let's get into a little bit of the details of the analysis. So the equation that you see up above is essentially the incremental cost approach, which is the growth in CIP asset values plus the financing cost divided by the projected growth in equivalent dwelling units. The table below represents the values used in that equation to derive the updated cap fee. So just for reference, the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 line items represent the numerator of the equation above, and number 4 represents the denominator of the equation above. So in the table, there is 3 columns. The first column represents the cap fee study that was done in 2019 and derived a fee of $12,986. The second column represents the Twin Oaks Subbasin project, or the additional 2023 analysis, which added $2,806 per EDU to the analysis, which derived finally a value of $791 per EDU. Just want to talk about the 4 elements real quickly and what they represent. So number 1 is expansion CIP. As Jason mentioned, these are these expansion projects that were identified related to new facilities that would basically serve expansion, new customers. So in the 2019 update, it incorporated the 2018 master plan projects, which included projects such as, for treatment, land outfall, pipelines, and pumping projects. In the 2023 update, or the Twin Oaks Subbasin update, it really incorporated that one project of 16,700 linear feet replacement of an 8-inch pipeline with 12, 15, and 18-inch segments. Number 2 is the financing cost, which represents future debt service payments adjusted to the present day value. Number 3 represents existing debt service payments used to finance expansion facilities that still currently have capacity to support new development. And number 4, EDUs, represents new equivalent dwelling units available for connections, which is about 8,400 EDUs. For reference, the existing system accommodates about 7.5 million gallons per day, or about 30,000 EDUs, and will be expanded to accommodate about 9.6 million gallons per day, or about 38,400 EDUs after the expansion projects. So next slide. So based on the analysis, the current and updated capital facility fees are shown. The column on the left represents the fee developed in the 2019 study, which was the $12,986. The column to the right represents the updated 2023 analysis, or Twin Oaks Subbasin analysis, which arrived at the fee of $15,791. Now, those 2 fees were updated to present day values based on indices, based on the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index. So that the old fee would have represented, would have been updated to $16,506, which is the current fee that you currently have in place now. And the new updated fee, the $15,791, would represent $20,059 based off of the new analysis. Those values are brought up to present day as of December 2023, so they would be the fees that would be implemented for 2024. So to wrap it up, and not to say the least, but the cap fee was, the analysis was appropriate for the analysis, and it definitely followed industry guidelines under the incremental cost approach. So I'll pass it back to Jason.
All right, thank you, Albert, appreciate it. So I just want to summarize a couple of concepts here, a couple of key concepts here, and one is that, again, we're not changing any of the methodology. We're not, we're jumping in our hot tub time machine. We're going back to 2019. We're ignoring all the variables. We're keeping them all consistent. We're keeping them all constant. We're going back to 2019 and saying, if we added this project, what would it cost? And then, like Alberto said, we're scaling it back up to that December 2023, which gets a little complicated, but the December 2023 is applied in 2024. So that, just to clarify that. And also, just to mention that this is, I just want to mention that if you don't keep those constants and methodologies the same, what you end up doing is triggering an entirely new master plan, right? And that, again, several years, several $100,000. So that's why everything remained same as we went back to 2019 and added this project. And I know you'd like to have this concluded, but there's more. So I want to also reiterate that this fee increase has no impact to our ratepayers. Okay, these are fees that are paid by developers. Also that, again, this is updated annually and that it's at the board sets these fees. So I just want to make that clear. And then lastly, just to give you a history of the outreach that was performed in this process, like Elizabeth said, once the SAMP was completed, we did present to P3 and to Finance last November, and then subsequently the CAP fee study was completed, and then we presented to Engineering and Equipment Committee in February, and then Finance again in March to give them an update. And then in March, we reached out to the in-basin developers and their representatives. We had a meeting with them here at the HQ, long meeting, explained the results of the SAMP and the CAP fee study. A lot of questions, a lot of dialogue. I will say in general, like most people, developers hate increases in fees, right? But I think they understand the reasons, they understand the methodology, and so there was positive response from that meeting. We then reached out to a larger audience, out to the BIA, told them that we had these results, and they invited us in April to come speak at their meeting. The results were presented to them with the intention that the district was going to ask the board to consider this increase. No response at that meeting and no response to date. Those documents, the SAMP and the CAP fee study, are included in your board packet. I included the link. They are available online, so they're very accessible. And with that, staff would like to recommend to the board to hold a public meeting on June 19th to allow the public an opportunity to offer comment on the revised wastewater capital facility fee and adopt the new wastewater capital facility fee ordinance, with the fees becoming effective July 1st, 2024. And we can answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Thank you for these presentations and all presenting together. I know it takes a lot to coordinate a presentation with multiple speakers, so thank you. Thank you for this information, for being here. Do we have any public speakers for this item?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. What questions do my colleagues have?
Just a quick observation. I was doing some mental math and I looked it up real quick, but 2019, the average new house price was for San Diego was $655,000. So that works out to about 2% of what the fee was or is right now. And then I did the math for new home price today. At the proposed rate, it would still be 2% almost exactly. So this is just 2024 update.
Thank you. What other comments or questions?
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to say that, as Jason mentioned, the engineering committee looked at this and we support the recommendation.
Thank you.
So just some clarification, I know we're not approving anything, but how does this compare to other agencies nearby as far as the $20,000 cap fee?
So we're one of the only growth agencies, so it's really apples and oranges. Most of the other agencies use either a hybrid or a buy-in method because they're pretty much built out or have what they call just infill projects. So there isn't a lot of comparison, unfortunately. Okay. So.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And then as far as, when are these fees collected from a developer? Upon application?
Yeah, so it actually used to be that the fees were collected, I think, prior to the construction agreement. Mm-hmm. And then the prior board, I'm not sure what year that was, changed it so that they have the opportunity to pay those fees anytime up until they get occupancy for their facility. So it gives them a lot of flexibility.
Okay. And so a follow-up to that, you mentioned it's non-refundable, non-transferable. Mm-hmm. Why would that not be non-transferable? If I'm a developer and I want to develop 10 homes, so I've got $200,000 in cap fees, all of a sudden, I don't want to develop anymore. I can't transfer those fees to a new developer that comes on in?
No, it stays with the property, it becomes a value of the property. So, for example, if somebody's buying a property that already has water and sewer service, capacities paid, that property value goes up, and then if you all of a sudden transfer it to another person, then it creates almost a secondary market where our services are being used as a commodity for trade, which is by itself an issue that I don't even understand all the legal ramifications on. So, but that's one of the main reasons. So it stays with the property, it always stays with the value of those capacity fees stay with that property to perpetuity.
So it could be transferred to the new developer?
To the new developer that buys that property,
Right,
yes.
okay, so it is transferable.
It runs with the land.
Yeah,
Right, that's what I'm saying, so it does run, so it is transferable.
Yeah.
As far as transferring it to a new developer.
Yeah, but
Doesn't-
as far-
doesn't- You can't transfer it with your own. So developer A, it backs out, developer B comes in and those fees are already paid.
Yeah, so all the infill
Okay.
projects you see, if they have existing capacities, they get full credit.
Once they're paid for that development it doesn't go with the developer, it goes with the land.
Yeah, I apologize, yeah, the term transferable means I could use it on a different property, I could use it somewhere else.
Right, no, the developer can't, but it stays with, okay, no, I wanted to clarify that helps, thank you.
And I would say about, I don't know, 99% of developers pay this fee right before occupancy.
Right. Okay. No, thank you, great presentation, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So this is a specialized area of development that we are, that we've done a reanalysis of the capacity fees, and the capacity fees are being applied to everyone. In the past, how has that been received? Or is this the first time that we have taken on kind of a specialized area where we know that there's going to be development and it's raising the cost for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the master plan looks at growth throughout, all in these different areas and amalgamates it into one that everybody pays. In this case, which is unique, and normally we do that through a standard master plan process, which is every 5 years or so. So this is the first time we've looked at this, but essentially it's the same methodology, it's the same process. So we're not changing any of that. It's still always applied to everybody.
Okay, and the response to that has been?
That's
Yeah.
consistent in the industry currently.
Okay.
It's a single fee, whether it's a PFC fee from the city or for us, capacity fees are uniformly applied, and that's really the standard in the industry.
Okay.
There's some places that could have special assessment areas, and when you create a special assessment area, that's what usually is frowned upon, so.
Okay. And again, if I understood the presentation and the documents correctly, the reason why we are looking at this now is because we didn't have in our master plan any proposed development in this area for another 7-8 years, but there is a desire to develop this area. So it has triggered this process on our part to look at the methodology and implement a new fee because the timeline has been moved up based on demand. Is that an accurate
Yeah.
summary?
Yeah, that's correct. When we do the master plan, it's a snapshot in time, right? And we're using estimates and projections, but development for many reasons can accelerate, it can slow, it can be more in other areas than other areas. So in this case, yeah, developers were coming in, like Elizabeth said, and it was triggering this, and we said, well, you've got options, none of them were good, and they said, okay, well, what can the district do? And it was, well, we can wait for another master plan, or we can do a little mini study here, and that's what they were supporting.
Okay, and I understand that we have had several types of outreach and dialogue with stakeholders, and surprisingly, there has been no response from some of our stakeholders and no public comment. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, in fact, prior to this board meeting, we did reach out again to the in-basin developers to just let them know, hey, this was on the docket, and it was an opportunity if they were interested. And
Okay.
following this action, we'll update those stakeholders as well. And we've also been coordinating with the city of San Marcos because obviously they're dealing with the same developers. So we've been working with them through this whole process to kind of update them on what the results were and what our discussions were.
Interesting, okay. Well, thank you again for the presentation and the background. And are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues?
Just a concern as I'm sitting here thinking, cost of money, it's expensive. So now the recommendation is we're going to develop it, we're going to proceed with this improvement on our dime right now and get it back from the developers down the road, estimating 8,400 EDUs. I mean, if we have 8,400 EDUs in 10 years, it's great. We get the money back, it's paid off. I mean, if we have 1,000 one year and then 1,000 the next year, and then it goes off 10, 12, 15, 20 years down the road before we reach that 8,400, that cost of money is, I mean, how are we going to do that?
Yeah, and that's the methodology we use. We get about probably 325 EDUs on average per year. I'd say over the last 7 years, that's the money coming in to that bucket.
Right.
And then as we build these projects, whatever component is expansion, then comes out of that bucket as Senior Engineer Ryan Morgan brings you these projects forward. And
So how far out is that projected? I mean, to be that 84, when are we going to reach that 8,400 to pay this off?
So that takes out a little bit beyond basically 2035.
2035?
Yeah, that takes out, but however, this is why the district has to do an updated master plan, and it's actually in the proposed budget for an updated master plan, because that'll help us reset those growth figures. And the only reason that the board hasn't seen an updated master plan per date, because we haven't gotten a new growth projection from Sandag based on the 2020 census. So the existing growth projections are still from the 2010 census data. And of course, none of the general plans, whether it's from the county or the city, has also been updated. So our current master plan actually has the current most recent, even though it's a 2019 adoption, a 2018 document that was started in 2016. Right. It has the most recent growth projections that are out there and has the most recent land use adoptions. So, but once one of those things change, we could trigger an updated master plan, relook at the fees, relook at where we are in collections, and go basically this whole process over again, but looking at it more holistically.
And just to give you also a sense of the time frame,
Yeah.
if the board were to move forward with this, we would then have to take this project out to design. That takes probably about 2+ years, depending on environmental coordination, and then probably takes about 2 years to build. And that's really when the big money starts leaving that bucket.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, 2030 will be built, and 2035 is projecting.
Yeah, so I would say within the time frame that we're, designing and building this, or probably designing this project, we're probably due for another new master plan. And like the general manager said, it's sort of already in the queue.
So in that case, excuse me, if we did that and we still have 2024 capacity fees, do we go through the process again, and then we say, you haven't paid the capacity fees that we told you we were going to charge you in 2024 because we haven't made it to that stage in the development process. It's 2030, and now, in fact, it's not $20,000. It's $22,000 or $23,000. Am I understanding the process correctly?
Yeah, the fees, inevitably, fees always seem to go up, and
Yeah.
that's just, not necessarily, I guess. It all depends on what, again, through the master plan project, what projects we identify for growth. If the growth projections, or if the land designations, or the trends, all those variables that come out with that list of projects, if it doesn't support growth, or it dials back, then you're not going to have those projects that would need to be funded through higher cap fees. But we would go through that whole process.
Madam President, if you think about the new Sandag growth projections that are expected to come out sometime this year, is going to take those growth projections beyond 2035. They're going to take them out to 2045 or 2050. I don't know where those numbers will stop. Then we're going to have new growth projections to look at what projects need to be built. I don't know what it will look like for our area, or what the city's or the county's land use will be at the time. But each one of those is a triggering event for the district to reevaluate, since we're not a land use agency. We have to wait for the land use agencies to provide us with that information of what type of growth happens. And then the population growth numbers that are coming out of Sandag gives us that 5-year increment out for about 20 to 25 years from when they release it. And that's what it comes down to.
But we wouldn't expect this project to really change fundamentally. Like I said, the existing pipe is at capacity, so any development is going to trigger a need to upsize it, so.
And it is the case that if we are looking at raising capacity fees, which we say we do annually, but I don't think we actually do it quite annually. We try, since 2019, we have been trying to.
Well, the board sets the fee, and then after that, we just update it annually based on ENR. So that
Okay,
happens
we do it.
every January,
Okay.
that fee gets
Okay.
increased.
Okay, I know there was a period of time that we did not do that.
That was through the master plan
Yeah, okay,
process, but it
okay.
is updated annually.
Yeah, just to clarify, it was still updated annually, but we didn't refresh to a brand-new fee.
Okay.
So,
So that being said, this is not the only development that's happening in our city. So we need to increase the capacity fees anyway, based on development that may occur elsewhere.
Yeah,
Is that
when we-
correct?
Yeah, when
Okay.
we do the new master plan process, we'll be looking at all that development.
Okay.
Correct.
What other questions do folks have? Okay. All right. Then if there's no further discussion, may I have a motion to approve action item 2.2 as presented?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion by Director Elitharp, seconded by Director Hernandez. Please vote. Okay, and it passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your diligence and your background work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have
Thank you.
action item 2.3, Vallecitos Water District Fiscal Year 2024-2025 Budget Update.
yes, I'll do a little dancing here while Wes gets his presentation ready and his team ready. So the budget process is underway, and we've had several finance committees, at least 3, going through it. But the full board, this is the first opportunity for the full board to see the whole budget process. So this is going to be a little longer presentation where we walk through the entire budget itself. With that, this is the first board workshop for the budget update, and we're looking at getting comments from the board, concerns and questions to address. And then the staff is planning on coming back on the 15th for a update based on board comments, recommendations. And then ideally, we're looking at adoption of budget in the first board meeting in June. With that, I'll hand it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Wes Owen.
Good evening, President Boyd Hodgson, members of the board. As GM Gumpel mentioned, it's probably going to be a long presentation tonight, but I know we're all excited to do it, right? So this is a budget update tonight. This is just to get the board caught up with what the Finance Committee and staff have been working on for months. But we want to get you caught up and give a very exciting presentation. I know Jody's excited. Mike's excited as well, so we've got a team presentation. So without further ado, this is the budget party page, and we all get excited when we see this. Believe it or not, this page has been around for 6 years. I've been giving this, and we've been giving this in all of our presentations for 6 years. But it's with a little bit of sadness and much excitement that I think it's time for it to retire. So with that, we will have a new budget party page. So here's the 2025 budget party page. So this presentation has already kicked off on the right foot, right? It's very exciting. It's probably downhill from here, I'm sorry. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to go through what the committee's gone through, and similar to what you've seen in the past, we're going to start with actual versus budget for the last 6 years, so how we've been doing in budgeting. Then we're going to talk about the preliminary salaries and benefits. After that, we'll go into the operating budget requests. Next will be the capital budget requests. Then Mike will talk about water purchases and revenues and give you an update on where the water authority, so we got some new news there. And finally, new and exciting will be the preliminary reserve levels, so how are reserves looking for the 5-year forecasting plan.
And even though this is a similar budget presentation as last year, we're starting out with that new budget party page. There will also be some exciting new slides that have mixed in with the old slides.
New slides, new presenters. This is Jody's first year. So the budget calendar, we always prepare a budget calendar to give us a roadmap for our meetings and to guide us through the process. In February, staff compiles the actual for 2023, the audited numbers, and starts to put together the department requests. On February 29th, we had our first Finance Committee meeting. We went over the budget calendar and the actual versus budget for the last 5 years. Next, in March, we will actually compile the department budget requests that are due in February, put them into the budget, and start working on payroll estimates and debt service forecasts. And then there was another Finance Committee meeting on March 24th in which we talked about the operating budget requests, all the materials and services. And I forgot to mention, but there is a draft budget and a detailed materials and services list in your board packet that we will be referring to during the presentation if you'd like to follow along. So clicking in April, that's when we incorporate all the operating budgets into the budget and we start doing our revising and refining in our QA/QC. On April 9th, 2024, we had our third Finance Committee meeting. That was a very long meeting. We talked about salaries and benefits. We talked about capital projects and water cost estimates and revenue requirements. So that was a lengthy meeting, and we're getting all three of these in one tonight, so we're going to try to summarize it for you. Looks like it went backwards. And then in May, which is now, we've now done the 5-year reserve projections as well as the 10 consolidated years. We've put together the first draft of the budget. And today we are giving you a draft budget update and getting any feedback from you on the budget and any questions you have so we can incorporate them in the May 15th meeting. So now we're all caught up on the budget calendar. So taking a look at what we've done in the Finance Committee meetings. As I mentioned, first we did budget to actual. So here are the water operating expenses budget to actual over the last 6 years. And you can see historically, or at least over the last 4 years, we've been under budget. And in 2022, we were under budget by 5.77%. In 23, we came in under budget by 4.98%, or $663,000. The reason for that, or the major reasons for that, was that pumping was actually under budget on power costs. Meters were under budget by $269,000 due to staffing and inability to get products, so the material, the meters and MXUs and things. Customer accounts was under budget by $195,000. That's just we budgeted too much bad debt, which we've been still recovering from COVID. We still got that plan where we're ramping out of the bad debt, and we actually have pretty much no bad debt now, but we budgeted around $119,000. So there's that, and then the fees for the hangars and InfoSend charges were less than anticipated as well. Safety was under budget by $127,000. That was due to staffing. We actually have one position that's been vacant for most of the year. We had our HR manager retired during the year, so that position was vacant for a portion of the year as well, so that's mostly labor. IT was under budget by $147,000. Again, staffing, they had a position that was vacated and actually hasn't been filled still. And then they also didn't do or purchase some Microsoft licenses that they had budgeted for. And finally, G&A was under budget by $272,000, mostly due to an increase in overhead or more time charged to projects. So that's the water budget to actual. Moving on to sewer. We can see we were under budget by 9.67% in 2023, or $775,000. A lot of the explanations, I won't go through them all because a lot of them mirror each other. Water and sewer, our general accounts like IT, customer service, things like that, apply to the entire district, and water and sewer are split 51-49. So you're going to see the same variances in IT, customer service, engineering even. But one of the differences is collections and conveyance actually was under budget by $114,000 as a result of switching chemical providers, and we had some savings realized there. So that's the sewer budget to actual. And if I'm going too fast, like I said, it's a long presentation. I'm going to go pretty fast, but if you have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask, and or slow me down. Next, we're going to go into the preliminary salaries and benefits in the draft budget. So this is on page 25 of the draft budget that's included in your board packet. And I've added these columns to the right for analytical purposes and for the presentation. And you can see the labels up top that just explain how we got the numbers that we've derived in the slide. First, we're going to take a look at projected versus budget. And so projected 2024 versus budget for 2024, because we're not finished with 24 yet, we had to project to the end of June. How are we looking? So we're actually projected to be under budget in salaries by $1.1 million. and we're projected to be under budget in salaries and benefits by a total of $1.6 million. And this is due to a lot of turnover during the year and delays in replacing positions at actually lower pay. During the year, we've had 11 new hires, and we've had 4 vacant positions for the majority of the year. Currently, we have 8 vacant positions. So there's just a lot of turnover, staffing issues, and vacancies that are causing lower salaries for the year. So we're under budget. And then you can see the decrease in salaries, or the projected $1.1 million under budget. Now looking at projected versus actual. So projected 2024 versus actual 2023, how do we do? The projected for 24 is actually projected to be $72,000 higher than 2023, but $167,000 under 2023 in total with salaries and benefits. And the reason for that is that PERS is actually lower in 2024. And that, as you remember, we were fully funded in 2023. So we did not have to make a payment to our unfunded accrued liability. So we saved $802,000 by not having to make that payment on the unfunded accrued liability. Last, we'll go budget versus budget. So 2024-5 versus 2024. And we are budgeting $669,000 increase in 2025. That's really just due to normal steps and being fully staffed during the year. So we have 32 normal steps that are going to happen, and we're hoping to fill those 8 vacant positions during the year. And that's 5.55%. Benefits are budgeted to increase by $576,000, mainly as a result of an increase in PERS. So here we go with the ups and downs in PERS. We were fully funded in 23. We just found out they had losses after that, so now we have an unfunded accrued liability, and there is a required payment in 2025. The minimum required payment for that is $432,000, so that's why we're actually showing a variance there of $428,000. And finally, we're budgeted to salary and benefits is budgeted to be higher by $1.2 million in total, or 6.88% for those reasons. And at the bottom, it's worth noting that we're actually budgeting to have half a position less in 2025 total authorized positions, because we're eliminating 1 position in the IT department. So there'll be 1 position eliminated. And we are requesting actually a part-time or permanent part-time position in engineering that's on the personnel page on page 32 of the draft budget. So net will be a half a position reduction from 24 to 25.
Are we currently at 102 employees?
102 right now. So moving on, the salaries and benefits, actual versus budget over the last 5 years. And on this graph, the bottom are the salaries, budget versus actual, the blue being the actual and the red being the budgeted. And then the top is the benefits. So in the green is the actual, or the budgeted, green is actual, and yellow is budgeted. So and you can see here the purpose of the slide is just to show that over the last 5 years, and this can go back even further, it's just it fits better on the screen with 5, but we've kept salaries and benefits very steady over the last 5 years, and we've actually done pretty well at budgeting, because overall we've been typically within 1.5% of budget versus actual. This year, 2024 being an exception because of the turnover that I mentioned. But we've kept it steady. I mean, you see the increase in 24, that was due to the MOU. But overall, salaries have been between 10 million and 12 million. And over 5 years isn't bad, and benefits between $5.5 and $6.6 million. So we're proud of this. The district as a whole should be proud of this, keeping salaries steady, and we like to talk about this. And one thing we actually added this year, as General Manager Gumpel mentioned, we went out and said, okay, we're bragging, saying how good we're doing. We're all proud of it. Let's take a look at ourselves versus other agencies and see what kind of comparisons we can make. So here's one of the things that we did, and actually I'll credit HR with this. Our HR department went out and did a survey of other agencies similar to us, and said, okay, how are we in number of employees versus connections? So with the connections we have, which is approximately 43,000 counting water and sewer, we have about 2.52 employees per 1,000 connections. So how does that compare to other agencies? Well, like Sweetwater has almost 7 employees per 1,000 connections. So we by far have less employees per connection than almost any other agency, with the exception of Otay Water District at 2.51. So we are very lean, and we do a lot more with less. And it is worth noting down bottom there, you see some agencies use consultants as an extension of staff. We got to win, right? So we had to look at how is Otay doing it. Well, they have several consultants that they use as an extension of staff in order to accomplish what they do, and have less staff. And we don't.
connections do they have?
I think they have around 56,000 connections. So they're a little bit bigger, and they have 140 employees, I believe. So we have 109.5, and we have about 43,000 connections.
And they have it fluctuates, but at one point they had 8 or 10 staff extension, full-time consultants that work with staff.
I've got a question.
And I believe we do have one.
We have one currently.
And we have one, so we have some as well. So I don't want to say we have none, but in comparison, I think we still win. Just saying.
So I know this is a long presentation, you're doing great, but just question. What do you attribute that to? I mean, we're being very efficient, but why?
Well, if you ask Jody, she'd say that we need more staff, I think. And if you ask most
But you're
people-
doing so great already.
And if you ask most people, you'd probably get the same response, but we have just struggled, well, we have worked to find efficiencies, and we've always done that. We've had improvements in our IT department, improvements in our reporting. I can't speak much for the field guys, but I can tell you on the admin side, just constantly improving and finding ways to do things just, quicker with less,
Just keep doing it, that's awesome.
Yeah, Vice President Penick, actually, that was asked, I believe, at the Finance Committee too, by maybe Director Ellithorpe. And one of the charts coming up, you'll see, at one point, we had some fat to trim. But then what's happened over many years, and the board's seen this, is we keep on reclassifying positions. So some of our lower level positions, we're very light on admin support, but we have higher technical people, so we're doing more with the amount of people, just have a lack of admin support, while a lot of other agencies have a lot more admin support. So we're figuring out ways to do it with the FTEs that we have, still keep our pay scales relative to other agencies, and basically get more value out of the employees and more higher level of employee engagement at the same time.
Good job.
You just have to constantly ask, is there a better way to do this or an easier way to do it?
Yeah, Wes, I had a question. I probably asked you this before, but I've forgotten. But I was just wondering what's the nature of the turnovers we've had? How many of those were retirements?
I think we had 11 retirements this year that we
No,
had?
they weren't all retirements, but we had over 50% of them are that might be a little high now, retirements. We've had several people on the ops side go over and get either promotions or jobs at other agencies.
I was just
And
wondering
that's going to always kind of be that option. And anytime, especially if somebody leaves for a promotion for another agency, that's actually, we're sad to see them go, but it's actually a proud moment because they were able to achieve that. So.
We do have several retirements actually coming up. We got 2 that are happening currently. So
How
that's
many
bringing us to
how many for the coming year?
I count on my hands, and nothing fully official, is up to 7 retirements, maybe 8 in the coming year. I've officially gotten 2 so far of that 7 or 8, and I know of a couple more, at least one more in the audience, that have already verbally let us know. But I haven't gotten it in writing, so it's not happening.
Thank you.
I think that's an excellent clarifying question, because, we've always been proud that people come to work here and they stay here. And while it's really important for us to be efficient and operate lean, we don't want to go below the level where we are too lean and staff is overwhelmed, because then it becomes a place where people don't want to work.
Yep.
And then we have trouble getting our work done. So thank you for asking that question, and thank you for clarifying that this is mostly attrition due to retirements, and thank you for keeping your finger on that pulse, because I think that's a really important point for us as an agency and workforce development that I keep banging the drum about. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, so that was the survey we conducted. Moving on to incorporating it into looking at what we've done and issues we've taken over the years, as far as, and General Manager Gumpel mentioned that he said had some fat to trim, I believe were the words he used. So back in 2016, so you can see back in 2016, we had 115.25 authorized positions. But 5.75 were vacant, so and that was through attrition. So we looked at those positions and we said, can we find efficiencies? Can we absorb those responsibilities elsewhere? And we were able to actually cut 3.5 positions in 2017. And then in 2017, we were in a similar situation, 4 vacant positions, and did the same sort of analysis and determined that we were able to cut an additional 4 positions in 2018. And since then, we've remained pretty much steady. We had the asset management position that was added a few years ago. We had the assistant operations manager that was added, I believe, last year. So we've added those 2 positions, but overall, we've stayed pretty steady. And actually this year, as I mentioned, we are going to be, or we have eliminated 1 position. So went up to 109.75 in '24. We're going to be back down to 108.75, and then you add the half to that, 109.25. So that's where we're at in 2025. And how does that, well, we actually just wanted to kind of incorporate that and compare it to the number of connections. So if you look at the employees we've had over the years and our actual connections, you can see here's a line to overlay that. So our number of connections during this time frame, about 10 years, has increased from 41,901 to 43,479. So our connections are constantly improving, or increasing. Our lines of pipe are constantly increasing. Everything's going up. Our staffing is staying pretty steady. So we are continuing to do more with less. And here on the same thing, you can see back in 2016, we had 2.75 people per 1,000 connections, or staff per 1,000 connections, and that went down to 2.52 over that 10 years. So we've actually gone down in staff per connections over the 10 years. Also, eliminating these positions has saved the district hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I know we've seen something like this, but I like to update it every year in current year's dollars. So looking at the initiatives that have been taken, eliminating 3.5 positions in 2017 is saving the district currently $253,000 in salary every year, $56,000 in benefits, for a total savings of $309,000. The 4 positions that were eliminated in 2018 saved the district $315,000 in salary, $70,000 in benefits, and $385,000 total every year. And this year, with the elimination of the 1 position, we'll save $114,000 in salary, $30,000 in benefits, for a total of $144,000 a year. Other initiatives we've taken, as you know, we pre-funded our other post-employment benefits. So this saved the district the cost of paying for retiree health care. By doing that, we're saving $464,000 in 2025. That amount is estimated to be $534,000 by the year 2029 that we will not have to pay for retiree health care. Another major initiative that we took was we pre-funded our PERS, unfunded accrued liability, and even with all the fluctuation in PERS and questions about it's going up and down, should we have done that, this is showing the savings on our actual payment. So when we started this process of pre-funding PERS, our payment for 2025 would have been $1.9 million. Even now, with our current unfunded accrued liability, and we're going to increase the required payment, well, with board approval and as we go through the budget process, the recommendation is going to be to pay more than the required minimum, because that's going to have a negative equity built into it. We're going to pay just a normal amortization. That payment would be $1.4 million. So the difference between the 1.9 and the 1.35 is about $600,000. So we're still saving $600,000 on the unfunded accrued liability by having less of an unfunded accrued liability and a lower payment. That's not even to mention the millions of dollars that we saved in interest if we had stayed with 18 million, had losses, and been paying interest on that now. So in total, all of these initiatives resulted in savings in salary of $682,000, benefits of $1.2 million, and total $1.9 million in savings every year, and that amount is only increasing. It is worth noting, however, that with the addition, I can't say it's all eliminating positions, we did add 2 positions, as I mentioned, and the half position, and the total burden of those 2.5 positions is $378,000. So you'd have to net that against this to get the appropriate savings. So that is the salaries and benefits. Next, we're going to talk about the water operating expenses and the draft budget for fiscal year 2025. This chart shows a summary of total water operating expenses of $53,352,000. And you will note down bottom that water purchases is $38,484,000, or 72% of our total budget. That only leaves 28% that we can really control at all. So when the Water Authority raises their rates, it affects 72% of our budget. So we are going to talk about, and Mike will get into the water purchases after Jody. So I'm going to focus on the other 28% right now, the $14.9 million, and specifically the $3.6 million of water operations costs. Because we already talked about the other 2, which are salaries and benefits. So going into the water operations, Before I get there, I want to go through the roadmap again. I'll go quickly because I know I think all of us have seen this now and understand it. But this is the materials and services detail pages that you have. I believe it's like 30 pages of details. On the top left, you have the line number. So if we reference it, we'll be referring to that line number of the item. Then it goes into the department, and the item being requested are items of materials and services or outside services. On the right, you see the person requesting it. Those are our supervisors of the department that put in the request for all the items. And then all the way to the right, you have whether it's recurring or not. And the majority of our items are year-to-year purchases that we need to operate, so they are recurring. So that feeds the actual budget on page 12. So the bottom left is just a smaller portion of the top. And you can see that the water quality department is on page 12 of the budget, and it has some of the details, but it's actually a summary. And then the materials and services of $75,000 rolls up to page 12 there. The $31,000 in outside services rolls up to outside services on page 12. And then we show the cost of labor by department as well for the total cost of that department of $167,000. That amount is further rolled up to page 11, which is the summary page for the water operating expenses. And this here will show, there's page 12 rolling up to page 11, and you can see there's the line for the water quality department. That's how we get from the detail to the summary in the actual draft budget document. We may work back to, as we're going through explanations, so I just wanted to give you that roadmap. Okay, so moving on to the actual budgeted operating expenses for water. This is page 11 of your draft budget, and we can see this column over here to the right is added for analytical purposes, so we can actually see the differences from budget year to budget year. And the total budget change is $572,000. These are our controllable costs for the most part. So these are operating expenses, salaries and benefits, what we have some control over, and you can see that what we have control over is only increasing by 4%. So that's pretty impressive. I think that's a really good job considering other, we're looking at potential 20% increases from the Water Authority. We're keeping our operating costs at a budget of only 4% higher than the previous year. And that actual increase is made up of increases in pumping costs, which is directly related to our power costs, which we really don't have a lot of control over. Transmission distribution is increasing by $180,000. The majority of that is labor, so we have labor cost increases there due to, again, normal steps and increases. And engineering is increasing up by $106,000 for the same reasons. There are labor cost increases there as well. So those are the three main increases in the water operating budget. And that's really all I have for the water operating budget and for my first portion of the presentation. So now I can pass it on to Jody unless you have any questions for me.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Wes.
We could try it. Okay, so currently the 24-25 wastewater operating expense budget is projected to total $17.3 million. This slide shows the breakdown of projected wastewater operating expenses. The total is comprised of projected Encina expenses of $4.4 million, salary and benefit costs of approximately $8.1 million, or 47% of the total budget. And then the focus will be on the remaining 28%, or $4.9 million of this total budget, which includes the Meadowlark plant and sewer operations. And also similar to what Wes was talking about earlier about controllable costs for water, controllable costs for wastewater, excluding power and chemicals, are 22% of total sewer budget, including capital. On average, controllable costs increased 3.2% annually for the last 10 years. For the wastewater budget, this summary information is on page 21 of the draft budget document. The column on the far right shows a 23-24 to 24-25 budget comparison. The total wastewater budget is proposed to increase 13.9%, or $2.1 million.
The majority of that increase, or $1.6 million, is comprised of increases to Encina and the Meadowlark plant. Encina projections are based on their budget, and Meadowlark costs are recovered primarily through reclaimed costs. So if those costs were eliminated, the wastewater budget would increase by 3.6%, or $548,000. The majority of that increase is within collection and conveyance due to increases in labor costs, IT to support, due to support and maintenance costs related to the SCADA system, and general and administration primarily due to increases in labor and a shift of a portion of the conservation public awareness costs from water to wastewater, since it was determined that certain programs not only benefited water but sewer as well. Next is the capital improvement program budget. Every project has its own summary page. This is an example of one of those pages. This is page 42 of the draft budget document. There are around 70 of these pages in the budget, and all of these summary pages are rolled up into a CIP master list. So at the very top is the project title. The description section describes the project and why it's needed. The project manager and project number are included. And then on the right is the department requesting the project and the funding sources for that project. The comments include more detailed information about what the project is going to accomplish. And there is a project spending plan section, which includes previous spending on the project and what the subsequent multi-year spending plan is projected to be for an overall 10-year spending plan projection. And then finally, the estimated project timeline shows when the project was approved, when each phase will be started and finished, and when the project is projected to be completed. And this is the top left portion of the CIP master list, which is an index of the budgeted capital projects. It has been separated into 4 sections for presentation purposes. The entire list is divided into 2 categories of projects: carryover projects and new projects. So we will be starting with the carryover projects, which are projects that were budgeted for in prior years and have not been completed yet. And you can see that the project page on the previous slide is included here and references page 42. And that is the page of the budget document where you will find the project summary information. This $85.7 million amount being carried over is the total 23-24 project budget plus any budget adjustments to date. Then the $19.3 million is the projected amount that will be spent on these projects as of 6/30/24. So the March actual project expense totals were used to project out 3 more months for this year-end total. And the $66.4 million, which is the difference between those 2 amounts, is the carry forward budget amount to be spent in future years. And then there's this $78.5 million in new requests, which are any adjustments and costs to those existing projects. And so the 3 largest new requests are for the land outfall parallel sewer section project for $40.5 million, the Twin Oaks Valley Road Sewer Improvement Phase 1 project for $21.1 million, the chlorine contact tank expansion project for $4 million. And continuing on with the carryover projects, this is another portion of the CIP master page showing the multi-year spending plan for the carryover projects on the far right. It is important to note that on June 5th, the board will only be asked to approve 1 year of capital project spending for fiscal year 24-25 only, which totals this $30.6 million. The 5 largest projects are the chlorine contact tank expansion, Tres Amigos water line replacement phase project, the Montiel lift station, Meadowlark failsafe rehabilitation, and the City of San Marcos Creek District project. And now moving on to the new projects. New projects are projects that have not been worked on in prior years. The total amount for new projects being requested is $81.3 million. Of the $81.3 million total, the more significant items are as follows: $32.4 million for Encina, $8.4 million for the SCADA remote site upgrade project, and then $36.2 million for future projects. And future projects will not be worked on in 24-25, but are included for multi-year financial planning purposes.
You're rolling, you're doing awesome, thank you. So these are up-to-date numbers from Encina? They're new increases? Okay.
I also have a question. For the new requests, this is a block amount that would be requested, but is it my understanding, is it correct that these numbers in the new request column could be spread over year? So for example, you wouldn't need the 455,000 for line 86. It might only be, the first year might only be X amount, and then it's spread out.
Yeah, she's going to go over the 5-year spending on it in just a
Okay.
minute. And
I'm sorry, I keep anticipating your presentation.
And the board will only be looking at 24-25, which will be a portion of the spending that you
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So, the total for all projects is $226.2 million. Continuing on, still with the new projects, this is showing the 5-year spending plan on the far right. The total new projects, all years, is 81.3 for the multi-year spending plan. And the 24-25 portion only is $10.4 million, which is primarily for the Encina project. And so the total 24-25 portion of the carryover and new project combined budget that will be brought to the board for approval in June is $40.9 million. And this is the section of the budget for vehicles and equipment. The total budget for these items is $2.2 million. That amount includes certain vehicles highlighted here in blue that were proposed in prior years as far back as 2022. They are being carried forward due to delayed receipt of the items. And there are approximately $1.4 million in new requests for 2025. Overall, the larger items budgeted are for a Vactor sewer cleaner, a Kenworth T370 truck, a, dump truck, a backhoe, and an Ford F-550.
I'd like to compliment that there are some electric vehicles in our list, because I ask this question every year when you show this particular slide about the district vehicles. And I noticed, so thank you. Thank you for investigating those options and making that switch. And I will continue to ask, because I know that we are staring down some state regulations that will require us to purchase more electric vehicles, but I want you to know that I noticed, so thank you.
So one thing I did want to note too, and Jody mentioned the Kentworth T370 truck. That's a carryover project from previous years, which we haven't been able to acquire. We recently got it, so it will no longer be on the budget. So when you see the budget on May 15th, that won't be on the list. I think we have at least one other vehicle that we're hoping to get before the end of June that should come off this list as well.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it. So next will be water sales and purchases presented by Mike.
Thank you. Well, he's loading up. Can I do two quick comments here? One, all of this is available online for the public who's watching, and I commend all the transparency that goes into this as well. I think a whole lot of work goes into this, and it shows. So I just want to thank you all for putting it together and highlighting some of the most important parts of it that demonstrate that we are doing the best we possibly can with the resources that we have to be as efficient as humanly possible to keep the rates down for our customers, which is the core piece here, and especially coming up here where so many costs that are completely uncontrollable to us are being, in my point of view, unfairly inflated.
And that's a good segue to this. Madam President, members of the board, it is about 6:30 and I have about enough caffeine for about 2 hours of this, so we should be good. So if you remember last year, the Water Authority said they were going to start their budget process early so they can get all the agencies their numbers early. Yes, they got us a number early. The number was way off, so it messed with all of our numbers. This year, I really haven't heard much. The early whispers that I've heard were 13% rate increases. Well, I wish. So we just got a memo or key points from the Water Authority last week, I believe, and you can see here that the rates increases being considered to maintain water reliability range from 16 to 22% in 2025. This is a direct quote from their key points. Some of their other key points which affect them, which would also be passed down to us, is that a lot of their fixed costs and long-term investments still must be paid. So it's kind of like your home mortgage. MWD passed on to them 11%, which now SDCWA is proposing to pass on to us 16 to 22. And there's other outside pressures such as the detachments and energy costs that are affecting rates too. So just about that pass-through rates and stuff that we have no control over, like Director Grosset just mentioned, pass on to us too. And important to note, it's a public agency. We don't make a profit, but we also can't operate with a loss year over year. So we also have rules and regulations that we have to follow, so we can't just raise rates to what, without following certain laws. So real quick, mention SCCWA. The budget that was presented today and can be presented with the reserve balances estimates that 13% we mentioned. I just got this memo late last week, so we didn't have time to incorporate it into this budget. It was already printed. But I wanted to kind of show you what would happen. If you remember, it was 16 to 22%. At 16%, it would mean an additional $1 million expenses into this budget. So right now, that is not accounted for. If it were to go up to 22%, that's $3 million in expenses added to the budget. And that's annually.
And that would all be water
This
costs.
is all, yes, this is
That's,
all
that, all of that
purchased.
money would go into the part of the pie that's the 72%.
Correct.
Thank you.
Right, which would increase that to 73-ish%. For VWD, if you remember, we passed through the Prop 218 a couple of years ago, and our rate increases are limited to the 6.5% right now. Had we not had a limit to this, we mentioned that 72% of the budget is purchased water. If it goes up 22%, it's simple math. 72% times 22% is about 16%. That means if our other operational costs did not go up a penny, the rate increase to the consumer would be about 16%. And to be fair, if I were to be doing rates right now, that's what I would propose to you guys, a 16% increase to our customers. We also have some adjustments to pump zone rates that we're going to that we have projected into the budget. So here's that chart about the fixed percentage of purchased water. Back 6 years ago, the percentage of fixed costs for purchased water is about 70%. Right now, it is about 72-ish% and proposed to go up to about 3/4 of our budget in a couple of years. So those are the totally uncontrollable costs that are passed down through us. So looking at our water purchases and revenue for the current year and projected for the next year. Right now, our water sales in about $28.9 million. That's our volumetric cost. The ready to serve, our fixed portion is about 15.7 million, and our pumping cost recovery is 312,000. I'll get into that in a second. Our water purchase costs for this current year is about 34.4 million. For next fiscal year, the water sales are projected to go up to 32 million. That is assuming the 6.5% increase that I previously mentioned, as well as about a 4% rebound in sales. As you know, with the last couple of years, we've had really wet rains. It's dropped over the 2-year period, I think our sales have dropped by about 10 to 12%. Just the last 12 months, it's dropped about 4.2%. So for the next budget, I'm projecting about a 4.2% increase from this year, basically going to what our demand was 2 years ago. Our water costs are projected to go up from 34 million to 38 million. And that's at that 13%. I've got to stress. Every year, we also do our sensitivity analysis. What would happen if sales were to go down by 10% or were they to go up by 10%? So we can kind of project and plan for that. So as I've mentioned before, if sales were to go down by 10%, what we're losing is a lot of Tier 3 water revenue. So our revenue decrease is more than what we would save in purchased water. So we would lose about $1.5 million if our sales were to go down 10%. Conversely, if our sales were to go up 10% over what's projected, it would actually be to the betterment of about $1.6 million to our reserves. So our projected water costs, again, and I'm actually going to advance 2 slides here just to show you. These numbers are based on the 13%. I can't reiterate that enough. Once we get more finalized numbers from the Water Authority, we'll go ahead and update this chart. But we have various, and I'll call them sources of water that we purchase, although all of it really basically comes from the Water Authority. We have our desal water. That is a contractual amount of 3,500 acre feet. That is a very expensive supply of water. It's about $3,700 per acre foot. We also have a contract with OMWD for a raw water exchange that we get a discount on the treatment costs. The contract is 2,750 acre feet, and it's 1,800 and change per acre foot for that. And the water from the Water Authority, again, that 1905 is most likely going to go up to about 1960, is any remaining water that we need to purchase to come up with the total projected amount of 13,590 acre feet.
Real quick on this one. Since desal is so insanely expensive, and I brought this up last meeting, and you said it's something we do already. We look to verify that it's actual water coming from them and they're not arbitraging the system. I would love to see personally verifiable proof that we can share with the public to just verify that. And then also, if their power bill is available as well, because that's where all this cost is coming from, I want to see that too. I want to make sure that we're getting what we pay for here.
Okay.
Thank you.
So moving to the sewer is going to be a little bit more stable. There are no rate increases projected for this coming fiscal year. Our current fiscal year, we are projecting about $18.9 million in sewer revenue, about $3.5 million in reclaimed, and about $350,000 in other, which is late fees and things like that. For next year, you're not going to see anything but about a 1 to 2% delta in these amounts. Sewer revenue of about 19.1. The reclaimed water sales, we're working on a new agreement with OMWD and Carlsbad for reclaimed water. Projected revenue of about 3.7 million and other revenue of 280,000. That's coming down because we've received other revenue this year of like the arrearage program, so we're getting reimbursed, and that amount will not be as healthy as it is this current year.
I have a question about the reclaimed water sales. I don't think I have ever understood how the reclaimed water sales fluctuate based on drought. Do we see any impact on how much reclaimed water we sell based on drought, or how much water we buy, or how much water we sell? Is there any impact? Are they related at all?
Absolutely, Madam President. So during drought years, I know it's counterintuitive, but during drought years, our water sales go up because it's drier, it's hotter, people use more, and then we have to get out the public information message to get them to conserve. And recycled water is a drought-proof supply and does not have drought restrictions on it. So recycled water sales go up proportionally even higher during a drought. During wet years, people turn off their irrigation systems. It's raining, so recycled water sales go down, and also water sales go down during wet years.
So it's the same. Okay, thank you.
So total revenue is going to increase by about 1.7%, I believe, from 22.7 million to 23.1. And I think that's the end of my presentations, unless there's any questions I can answer. And I still have caffeine left, so we're good.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I've got a comment. Maybe you can go into a little more detail on what some of the drivers are from MWD and the Water Authority.
Yeah, so Water Authority, I know besides what, I'm not sure with the MWD, I'll defer to General Manager for that, but with the Water Authority, it's their debt service, their 11% that's passed on through the MWD, the same charges that we're seeing in terms of electricity costs and things like that. I am not so sure with their budget, with Water Authority's budget, what they're putting else in there.
And in at the general manager meeting, we didn't get all the information that happened behind the curtain, so to speak. But I know that there's a difference between that 60 and 22%. It includes their financial stability, refreshing and replenishing somewhat of the rate stabilization funds. So over the last several years, the Water Authority's pulled all the levers to, in their words and with some truth, artificially keep rates down. But as sales have decreased with 2 wet years in a row, which have quote unquote never happened before, but has obviously happened, those levers are no longer available or even financially accessible to them. So there's that portion of it, and Metropolitan has an almost similar story, but Metropolitan also has a lot more funding with their pure water and other water projects, and then obviously increasing their tax collection for, I believe, the Delta project.
Thank you.
And the Water Authority is also mentioning the Frexit, the Fallbrook Rainbow exit, as part of the cost drivers that are potentially coming up.
Yeah, they list as change conditions from the last figures we got. They list the detachment that's coming sooner than expected. Fallbrook rolled off January 1 of this year, and Rainbow's going to roll off January 1 of 2025. And that's sooner than expected.
Yeah. And I think they've credited that to roughly 4% of the total rate.
Right.
Maybe it's a little higher now, but that
About
was
4% is due to detachment.
So that could have put the rate at 12% to 18%. It's a 4% difference with the detachment. Okay.
That's right.
Seeing these, I mean, this is bad news. It's bad news that we are facing such a high percentage increase, and it drives home something that I've mentioned, and I believe my colleagues are in alignment with this, that we really need to be creative about how we fund ourselves. We need to move away from so much dependent upon water sales. It's not a sustainable business model. We can't encourage people to conserve when we sell water, and that's how we make our money. So it's an unsustainable business practice, and I'm not saying anything particularly revolutionary, but I just want to reiterate that as we are being charged these exorbitant increases from San Diego County and Metropolitan, that we have to pass through to our consumers. We have to be creative in ways that we think about how we fund ourselves. And I know we're limited by regulations, so that is a larger discussion, but it's worth noting that much of what we charge our customers is passed through costs, and we don't have a lot of control over that. But nevertheless, people are still hurting, and this is going to hit a lot of low-income people in disadvantaged communities and disinvested communities very, very significantly if we go forward with something like a 16% increase. It's just that's going to hurt a lot of families.
I would like to say one thing that's a little bit disappointing to me is historically, we've looked at our pass-through costs and said, the water authority is raising rates by 8%, 10%, whatever, we're gonna raise our rates by 4%. Our pass-through costs to customers have historically been lower than the cost to us. Looking at this, I'm seeing pass-through costs from the Metropolitan Water District of 11%, and the water authority requesting 22% from us. That's a little disappointing to me, but there's nothing that, you know, we can do to affect that. Another thing I did want to mention that hasn't been discussed, I think we meant to hit on it, our pumping charges, that is something that we actually haven't raised rates on since 2020. We're currently recovering about $400,000 of the $900,000 in pumping charges that we're should be collecting from our customers. So that's something we hope to revisit, look at the appropriate charges and see if we can collect some more revenue there as well, just to break even. Because 2020 to 2025 is 5 years that we haven't raised rates, and SDG&E has been raising our rates. So hopefully we'll bring some more information to the May 15th meeting on, you know, what those rates should look like to the board for discussion.
Yeah, Wes, was that complicated by the RESBIT electric rate that we got on?
So I know we had a setback with COVID, because during the COVID times, we looked at it and said, okay, yeah, it's probably not a good idea to be raising rates to customers, so let's put it on pause for a little bit. And then we brought it back, and I think part of it might have been that we said, hey, we need to raise these, but we're not sure where we'll go with the solar, you know, our solar benefits that we'll have. So there are several issues that, you know, could have caused us to delay the, you know, that increase. But it's something that we're recognizing now, and hopefully when we bring it to the board for discussion, we can talk about a policy going forward that will be sort of automatic. Maybe we pass through the SDG&E charges through policy. So when they raise their rates 5%, it'll appropriately be passed through the customer by the same amount, so that we are constantly made whole and stay consistent with our policy.
How will the new community power agreement in San Marcos impact us? Is that?
Go ahead.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so no, it has very little to no impact on us overall. So the overall power rates, when we looked at it, there's certain aspects of our bills that we could have saved a little bit of money. But then when they add on the SDG&E charges and the conveyance charges, it ends up doesn't save any money. Also, any credits on our existing solar array projects that we have above and beyond, you don't get any credit for. So you still get charged all the SDG&E project. It doesn't get credited back completely. So when you have a large solar array installation, those projects, depending on the size, there's a break even, and the larger it is, the more it makes sense to stay with SDG&E. So at the end of the day, not all of our facilities, but majority of them, I believe, are still on SDG&E.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. We always say there's nothing we can do about it. There's multiple agencies in San Diego County having the same discussion. I don't know, is there a kickback? I mean, what happens if these agencies get together? And I mean, is there any other recourse that agencies are doing when you just take the 20% and say there's nothing we can do about it?
Well, the general manager's meeting, and not to get too much into my
Not
GM
the
portion,
just
but,
like, is there any, recourse?
you know, really have focused on, you know, the water authority has to be solvent. At the end of the day, that's who brings in water, has all the long-term contracts. They have to be a solvent agency and need to be funded one way or another. Historic rate increases were up to 30% after the big drought in the 90s. This is a different situation. That started a massive amount of building, you know, $4 billion of emergency storage projects, or I don't know what the number is now, but, you know, a building with that money. So, you know, it's messaging and where can we do, how can we offload water. San Diego has more water than it can consume, is what it comes down to. And the current management there is doing all the right things. They're going out, they're negotiating with other states, they're going to Washington, they're finding other offload to exchange water, do paper exchanges for water on the river. So they're doing the right thing. But the fruits of that labor won't be born for many years.
Thank you. The other thing I'd add, Jim, you got to look at the political structure of both the Water Authority and MET and see that you have very little control out of the metropolitan areas. And I think that was a theme that came out of MET relative to its increases. They were able to horse trade essentially They were looking at 22% increase, I think, on rates, and then they rolled in ad valorem for savings, but the rates went higher than they were projecting when you add in the ad valorem. And they've got a big pure water project. The big metropolitan areas, including the city of San Diego, I think, is looking at decreasing its take from the water authority. So the structure doesn't bode well for for the North County Coalition to change. I know we've done that in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that the water sales for the water authority they're actually dipping below their take-or-pay contracts. So that's why the big push to market some of this water to other agencies, Orange County, other states. So yeah, it's become a emphasis not on supply anymore, but affordability because of these huge fixed costs and these roll-offs of demand.
Is it possible to revisit our contract with the desal plant? I'm asking because, the desal plant has been in operation for a few years now, and I imagine that the operation, the startup costs of that would be relatively high, but I would assume that efficiencies would take place and perhaps more people would connect directly in. I don't know if that's been being talked about, but is there a way to renegotiate that contract, or is there any savings there? That's the most expensive water that we have.
The simple, really quick answer is no.
Okay.
However, Director Elthrop and I have met with the general manager at the Water Authority to talk about opportunities that may provide cost savings and other avenues. We did not get shot down, but it's something that's going to revisit. And again, a lot of those the front end work that the general manager's doing over there, it's going to take several years before it bears fruit. And when it does, I plan on revisiting that same subject, because right now it's just theoretical numbers. But I want to get kind of our shoe in the door so it doesn't close on us, to talk about the theory and the concepts of maybe offloading a proportional percentage of our desal water costs if the water authority is offloading those costs to set that expect. So this way it goes to the appropriate agencies that are buying. The contract doesn't fully support that, but the contract language never envisioned that. So they're looking into it, and we may not move forward with anything. But even if it is a yes today, our ratepayers won't see any results from that for many years.
Okay, thank you.
When that contract runs through when, do you know?
I have to double check it, but it's either, it's 25 or 30-year contracts usually for water purchase agreements.
25 or 30 years?
Yeah, usually,
From
but I don't.
10 years ago?
I don't recall. It's a little less than 10 years now. I think 2018.
So that's not, that's not crazy far out there now. 2035 is right around the corner.
Right around the corner, Director Panic.
Seems like it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now for the fun stuff. How do our reserve levels look here from the draft budget? And keep in mind thanks, Mike. And keep in mind that this is with the 13% assumption built in for the rate increases. We have some outer year rate increases built in as well, trying to go lower and be as conservative as possible. But taking a look at the replacement reserves, which are the reserves that are actually funded by rates, as you know, the amount of reserves that we must maintain is determined by our reserve policy. The reserve policy says we will keep 6 months of operating expenses in reserves plus 3 years of projected system replacement costs. That's the minimum that we're required to maintain per policy. That's our floor. And here you can see that the floor in 2025 is $23 million. By 2029, that will be $27 million. We use that for our long-term financial planning. And the goal is to stay above that as well as meet other criteria from rating agencies. The ceiling in 2025 is $65 million, and the ceiling is determined as 6 months of operating expenses plus 10 years of projected system replacement costs. That's the maximum we will keep in our reserves. If we go above that, it's rate stabilization and will apply directly to our future rates. 2029, the ceiling will be $72 million. So what does our balance look like in the water replacement reserves and the draft budget as it stands today? You can see here is the orange line that shows our reserve levels. And, 22, 23, we got close to the ceiling. That was done intentionally because we know that we have a lot of future projects that will need to be funded. So you get it close to the ceiling so you can fund those projects. In 2025, we have approximately $13 million in water replacement projects to fund, which will bring that amount down to $33 million. And then by 2029, we'll be around $29 million in total water replacement reserves, which is closer to the floor, but still above the floor and within policy limits. So given the current situation, if we were able to, with the 13% rates, and the assumptions that are built into for the future. So 25, we're looking okay with our existing Prop 218. We'll be at 33 million versus 23 million. We would have to maximize what we can do for the Prop 218. In outer years, though, in 2026, we'd have to come back to a new Prop 218, look at a potential 13% rate increase, as Mike mentioned. And now we'll have to change those assumptions a little bit. And then in the outer years, we built in the necessary rate increases. Again, that's a financial plan. It's nothing that the board is looking at to approve now. It's just what we will need to include in our financial plan in order to sort of appease the ratepayers or the rating agencies and be fiscally responsible. But there are no. It's also important to note that there are no debt issuance assumptions in this 5-year forecast. So there's no debt issuance in there that will affect rates. It's just our operating costs and rate increases.
On that, sorry, is it all right? Yeah, I was going to ask, because we have a big project we just talked about, possibly the Twin Oaks.
That's actually sewer, but yes.
Okay, so does this affect sewer at all?
Sewer will be next.
Okay.
Trace Amigos pipeline,
Well-
for example, that affects this.
Okay, that's what,
Yeah.
does that affect credit rating depending on how close we are to ceiling and or floor?
Yes. So rating agencies will come out and they'll look at our days in cash that we have in reserve. So it's basically the amount of reserves you have divided by operating days. They say days in cash. There's that. There's the quality of your management, your willingness of the board to raise rates, and your financial planning tools that you have. So something, like our budget is a good financial planning tool. We went out for debt in 2021, and we get surveyed every year. Every year they come back, they ask for all this information, and they say, okay, we're approving, you're maintaining your AAA rating. And we do currently have a AAA rating, so I'm gonna say that on camera out loud. And we'd like to maintain that. So that's why we do the very thorough.
So your foresight is if we see that we're gonna be borrowing money in 2-3 years, you're trying to get closer to the ceiling than the floor.
So I'm hoping, the only avenue I would say to trigger a debt issuance is if it's absolutely necessary, but I want to do it before I need to rather than when I need to, right? When it's appropriate and when it makes the most sense. Like during the COVID times when rates went down to 2.24%, at that point I was like, do we need to issue debt in the near future? If so, let's get on it now because it's 2.24%.
That's where you're at.
So let's be proactive in addressing that to see if we can issue the debt. I don't want to be forced to issue debt and be at a 7% interest rate. So, but if we were to look at this and say, we're going to be at the floor or below the floor in 2027, how can we address that? Our first thing is we say, can we raise rates enough that it's tolerable to get us back there? And if we can, great, we do. If we can't, then we consider issuing debt.
And the management discussion is exactly that. When we start forecasting things out, we look at the interest rate environment. Issuing debt, in the next year, next couple of years, it does not look favorable.
Typically, that's the last. This actually states in the policy that we will do everything we can not to issue debt if it affects rates. If we had a huge project and it was unavoidable that we had to do that and had to finance it, that might be an instance where we would consider it. But by doing the 5-year plan, we can take a look at it and say, what does it look like? May we have to issue debt in the near future? And you'll see that in the reserves, the wastewater reserves, in just a minute. So here are the sewer replacement reserves, and I won't go through the one at a time. So we have the floor and the ceiling shown here. The floor is exactly the same as water. You have 6 months of operating expenses plus 3 years of projected system replacement costs. For the ceiling, we actually have 6 months of operating expenses plus 8 years of projected system replacement costs. So it's a little different than the water. And our current sewer balance and forecast looks excuse me, like this. So sewer is not quite as close to the ceiling. The ceiling, you'll notice the ceiling is actually much higher because the assets we have a lot more of them and they cost more. But in 2025, we do have a lot of sewer projects and a lot of projects coming up in the future. I would like to point out the balance will be 50 million in 2025 versus 40 for the floor. And it'll be around 48 million in 2029. We'll still be within policy limits. However, there is an assumption built in 2027 that we may need to consider issuing debt. At that point, Jason actually went through it. We had the CCT, actually I think it was Jody, the CCT tank expansion and the conversion to sodium hypochlorite projects that will be done. Those two projects are going to potentially require the need for about a $13 million debt issuance in 2027. Fortunately, though, those projects are going to be funded by reclaimed funds and capacity funds. So those are both related to reclaimed, so 70% is reclaimed water. What will happen is we'll issue the debt, and then the debt service will actually be paid by the reclaimed customers, and the rest of it will be paid through capacity fees. So it will not affect rates and when we issue the debt, and if we still need to issue the debt in 2027, it won't affect rates anyway.
And the board may recall back in 2020, 2021, staff was criticized of how close to the ceiling we were. We had too many reserves, and we kept on showing a spending plan because we had a large capital outlay. Well, now we're in that large capital outlay.
So the budget as it stands, we do maintain healthy reserves. We're well above what we consider required days in cash for the rating agencies, and there isn't a need for debt issuance in regards to rates. So overall, it's a good story for us, minus the rate increases from the Water Authority that we have to consider as we go into this process. That will change for the next meeting because we'll have to look at the 16 to 22. Hopefully we get more news before then and can incorporate more accurate numbers, but right now this is our 5-year forecast.
Yeah, I've got a question. Are you assuming that a 22% for the Water Authority equates to 16 for us? I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, let me, 1 second.
Really quick,
I have the math written down.
it's right now in the budget, we're assuming a 13% increase based on the initial Water Authority rate increase, so that portion of it, and that's all we're assuming currently, correct?
That's what's in the draft budget. Right now we only have 13% in the draft budget.
As the Water Authorities.
Yes. So
Okay.
we've built in, for our water person, we built in an assumption that they'd raise their rates by 13% based on the previous news that we got. So we haven't incorporated the 16 to 22 yet. That hasn't been done.
So 72% of 13 is their portion of our rate.
So we're roughly around 9. At 13%, our impact's about 9%.
At 13%, it'd be 9.9%. And I'll give you the rest of the numbers because I did them. At 16% Water Authority, and this is just the purchased water portion.
Right.
Assuming the operational stays at 0.
Right.
Right now, we have operational at 4%, I believe. At 16%, it would be about a 12.1 impact on rates. And at 22%, it'd be 16.5%.
Plus our 4% would be.
Our 4% of 28%, which is 1.1%. So the numbers I just stated add about 1.1% for operational costs.
And I think that's an important point to kind of restate. So we're looking at operational cost increase for our costs, about 4% total, which impacts our ratepayers about 1% in their bill. So our Vallecitos' portion is going to increase the bill as proposed 1% to our customers.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, the next steps in the process. On May 15th, we're actually going to bring the first proposed budget to the board. So we'll be doing a full budget presentation at that time with all the assumptions and recommendations from this meeting built into it. And then in June, we will revise and refine it and do all of our QA/QC to make an excellent document to bring on June 5th so that we can hopefully get the board's approval on the recommended budget. So June 5th is the end of the road for this budget process for 2025 and the end of, we'll use the budget party page again next year. This will be around for about 6 years or so.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I'd like to comment that having sort of what the outcomes would be, the stats that you just talked about, Mike, would be really helpful. So, for example, if, knowing that this is this considers a 13% increase, and it will increase rates by X percent over, I would like to connect those dots. I think that's really important. And so next time this is presented, hopefully we'll have more information. We'll know if it's closer to 16% from the Water Authority, hopefully, or if it's 22%, or maybe we won't know, but maybe we can have a slide that says 16% from the Water Authority translates, plus our 1.1% for operations, translates into an X percent increase in rates for our customers.
Yeah, I was trying to not do what the Water Authority is doing to us, is moving numbers and having different targets. So absolutely yes, and I'm hoping that we have a more solidified number from them, so I don't have to give such a big range, that it's more concrete. So absolutely, I can do that for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Deadline when they give that number?
June 30th, which is after we, it really is.
That's when the budget's adopted.
That's when their budget's due,
Yeah,
so.
For the next month, we're gonna be going through all these alternatives again, plus many more. And one thing to point out is, at alternative 8, which is looking like one of the most likely of the alternatives, they're looking at 20%.
Yep.
And they're looking at calendar year 26, 15%, calendar year 27, 4%, for a total of 39%. Every one of their alternatives adds up to 39% over 3 years. It's pretty ominous.
Yeah, but we've been told a 40% over 3 years,
Yep.
so that's the number that we've been told. How it comes in, well, I don't know yet.
So I'll also say that it seems like every year we have this conversation about the mismatch in the dates of the budget adoption between San Diego County Water Authority, which is critical for us, information for us to know when we're planning. Is there anything that we can do about that so that we are certain and at least more certain? Can we adjust our timing? Because that seems like that might be easier than the Water Authority adjusting their timing.
Well, I think the problem is that they gave numbers early, but they were worthless. I mean, Mike indicated that, and that's the truth. You can't rely on them, that information that soon.
So, yeah, and you're right, the timing has always been an issue, but their water rates, and correct me if I'm wrong, they become implemented on January 1st.
Correct.
So, yeah, so it's a calendar year basis. So for Vallecitos, even if we have a incorrect assumption on June 30th, coming to the new year, when we know what the real numbers are, it's still 6 months before it's implemented. And technically, we have the ability to make adjustments, whether it's coming back to the board for budget adjustments, if that's necessary, or modifying what we thought would be in our future rate increases with a new 218 based on their actual number. So that's kind of built in. The Water Authority can't move it up because they're waiting for Metropolitan, and the fiscal year is the fiscal year. So, but the only good news is that rate isn't effective to our customers and to us as an agency until January.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
On the reserves, at one point, was the 6 months decided by the board, or is that a mandate from another agency?
Yeah, that's actually approved by the board through the reserve policy. We use industry best practices for that, so we look at the GFOA best practices, what other agencies are doing. And typically the recommendations are 3 months or 6 months of operating reserves. The more the better, obviously, because then you'd be healthier financially. We also have to consider what the rating agencies are looking for. So if the median days in cash is 500 days in cash and we have 200, we risk losing our AAA rating because we don't have sufficient reserves to fund the future, and they look at that negatively. So all of that was considered in developing the reserve policy and determining that 6 months would be the best operating reserves for us.
Thank you for that explanation, and I think it's worthy of considering revisiting that in the future as all of these price increases are happening as a way to help assuage the impacts to our customers. I mean, there's a lot of people that just moved here and are paying over $10,000 a month for their mortgage and $1,000 for power and water now. So need to figure out a way to keep it sane. for lack of a better word.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your detailed work and your explanations that are very good as per usual. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that item was for information only. We will now move to reports. General Manager Gumpel.
Yes, so this is a little bit in advance, but there'll be some night work on Palomar Airport Road for paving starting on the 20th. So I'll give an update at the next board meeting to remind there. I want to report some good news. Water lab certification with the new standards. State adopted new standards that basically make it near impossible for small water labs to basically exist and stay certified. But our staff was able to meet all the criteria in our water operations department to get the new certification with the TI rules. For those board members that are on the Encina board, because of this new rule, they had to hire a brand-new lab technician just to meet the new rules. Well, we were able to accomplish that with the existing staff, so I'm very proud of that. And that certification is good for 2 years, so congratulations to them. I want to just make a public comment on the great event at the Hello Pod event yesterday. Chris and his team did a great job. I appreciate everybody showing up. And it was spectacular to watch that helicopter take water out and experience that very close up. So Tres Amigos is one of those big waterline projects that, and the board may recall, it's one of those projects that I reported on at the beginning of the year that we had, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but something like 13 breaks in 14 months on that project. It's way up at the northern end of our district in the hills of Vista. And part of it is an inherited system from a farmer when the district was first formed. So I don't know if this is really true. It's very close. The pipeline itself predates the existence of the district. So that pipe is going out to bid at the end of the month for replacement of that weaker, what we call steam pipe section. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to have a better, more reliable system in that area. Our Meadowlark projects that you kind of heard about are basically our chlorine contact tank and our expansion and our sodium hypochlorite, basically getting rid of that chlorine gas, which is a hazard, not only for our staff, but also for the community around, and replacing with a safer product. That is out to bid, and the bids are due at the end of the month, and that project also has grant funding of over $3 million associated with it. As far as events, Seed Library event at 10 a.m. on the 14th here at the district for any board members that are interested. And San Marcos Elementary Water Leaders presentation at the school at San Marcos Elementary on Friday, May 10th at 2:30. Unfortunately, I'll be out on a family trip, so I will be missing that one. So please take some pictures. And anybody who is there, please wish them congratulations from me. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Great, thank you. District Council, Jim Gilpin.
Thank you. I mentioned, I think a month or so ago, the initiative measure that has been circulated to restrict local agencies' ability to raise rates. And that initiative measure was challenged. It's at the Supreme Court, and they will be hearing oral arguments on May 8th. And the decision there is whether the initiative is qualified to go on the November ballot or not. So the Supreme Court will decide that. California Supreme Court. It's, I mean, from the water industry and there's a lot of opposition to it because it would change the standards under 218 and make it very difficult to raise rates even when you may need to, and the data is there. So,
I have a quick question on it. Jeff, would the wholesale agencies still be able to raise rates, just the local agencies wouldn't under that measure?
well, it would affect both Prop 13 and Prop 26, so it would have dual effects. Hardly anybody ever challenged it under 26, though. So the other one I wanted to bring your attention, there's a couple of others. President Boyd Hodgson raised with me an issue of AB 2666, which is not an initiative. It's proposed legislation that would change the rules that the PUC applies relative to changing its rates for public utilities. We would not be affected by it since our rates are not subject to CPUC approval, but other entities such as SDG&E and others would be affected by it. It changes the standard there and puts, I think, probably higher scrutiny on examining the rates to ensure that they're just and reasonable. That's going forward. So, but I'll report next time since it's late on some other legislation that's moving forward that CASA and others are looking at. At least two of the bills I'll tell you are related to the timing of developer fees, which would have been timely for tonight. So I'll report on those at the next meeting.
Thank you. San Diego County Water Authority.
Yeah, I'm about sick of talking about the water authority, but I think I have PTSD over this, all this rate alternative discussion, so. But anyway, the board met on their regular April meeting on the 25th, which was last week. One item that the board took action on for routine items was they awarded a design professional services contract to Hazen and Sawyer for a not to exceed amount of $5.64 million to provide design and engineering support services for the Moosa Canyon pipeline replacement project. And that's an area where the aqueducts cross over a drainage just west of I-15. And they're at major risk of failure if something isn't done there. So anyway, you know, the board meeting was obviously dominated by the discussion on rates and rate alternatives. And like I said, in the next month, we'll be looking at several of the same alternatives, and they're going to develop some more, but the news isn't great. Anyway, that's my report.
Thank you. Encino Wastewater Authority.
Yes, the board met on the 24th, and the items were the odor and corrosion control improvement project. The final design was approved, and the adoption of the physical budget, capital budget for 24-25 was approved. We then adjourned to the Encina Joint Advisory Committee for the same thing, and it was approved, the operating and capital budget. That was the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Standing committees. The P3 committee met, and we discussed the scholarship applications, which we have already mentioned tonight. Anything else that we?
Nothing on the committee, but I'll direct a comment when you're ready.
Okay. Director's reports on meetings, conferences, seminars attended.
May I?
Sure.
Just want to build on the Helo Pod event and give you props for a phenomenal speech. I think it was very inspiring, and props to Ed and staff here for doing an amazing execution there. And I got the behind the scenes Ed talk recorded if anyone wants to watch it, where he explains how everything was done. So
That's fantastic.
very cool. And also props to cross-agency work, really, really exceptional. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to do the same thing. Thank you for your leadership yesterday. That was a great event, and I think it points to the idea that we need to find more things to collaborate on, with this, particularly with the city. There's been far too little over the years, and I'd like to see some thinking outside the box to do collaboration on future projects. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other reports, meetings, conferences, seminars? No? Okay. Other business, the quarterly board expenses were included in our board packets, and those are available for the public to review. And now moving on to director's comments, future agenda items. We've already covered some of those. I have a couple of comments, but I'll offer any comments or agenda items. Okay. I will not be at the next board meeting, so I want to make sure that I go on the record stating that for budgetary items that I would like to see included, funded at their current levels, are the Water Leadership Program that we have implemented at the elementary schools, the scholarship program, as well as internships. We've talked a little bit about potentially paying interns. We haven't resolved that as far as I know, but I would like to leave that on the table as an option. So those are the things that I would like to see stay in the budget when it comes to the budget adoption. I know that feedback is going to be collected from the directors at the next meeting, but I will not be here for that meeting. I would like to commend my colleagues and staff for yesterday. What a great day. It was a tremendous event. It was well attended, and it just, such a tremendous sense of pride in our district and the things that we've accomplished. And I echo the comments that when we work together as agencies and we keep our eyes on the prize, so to speak, and we stop suing each other, we can get a lot done. And, I mentioned, of course, the progress tetrahedron, which I was just hoping would be a trending hashtag, but it just never took off. But in all honesty, we talked about the 4 organizations that came together to produce such a wonderful day yesterday. And, the progress tetrahedron was, of course, resources, expertise, people, and political will. And we saw high levels of all of those things yesterday, and it produced just such a wonderful day. It's going to keep our community safer, so I really want to commend staff for putting it together. I know it was a lot of moving parts, and all of the agencies that worked together to really make it happen. It's a tremendous benefit to our community. So I also want to mention, a couple of months ago, we co-sponsored an event with Project Next, and it was a community cleanup. I have received word that 23 students participated, so there was some benefit to the community keeping the water clean, keeping plastics out of the ocean with that cleanup. And finally, congratulations to the operations team for their water lab certification. That's a tremendous achievement. So I think that's all I have. Anything else from anybody? Okay. If there is nothing else, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.